Welcome back. In this video I will explain air and how to animate it. Keep in mind that air is invisible, so we cannot see it, not directly at least. So how can we portray in the animation that the air is moving? We do that with dust particles. When you think about the tornadoes and all sorts of air moving, although you cannot see it, you can feel it, but the only way to see it is only once the air picks up some kind of dust particles. It can be dirt, it can be sand, it can be anything. The point is you need something to represent the air. You cannot animate the air itself because, well, it's invisible. In one of the previous videos you might have seen this little gif from the anticipation. This is one simple example of it. A simple dust and puff of smoke, let's say, happening when the movement happens in the opposite direction. So in order for me to better convey to you how a specific element is moving and what kind of a particle you can expect from each element, I will remove as many details as possible. Remember that if you want to practice texturing, you can always do that. You can always add more details. But if the movement is not good, the animation won't look good. So in this section we are focusing on the movement aspect of it. First, let us take into consideration how our movement will affect the air. Suppose we have an object that is moving up. What this will create is differences in air pressure. So when we are moving up, we will be collecting dust particles around us towards this middle point. So they will collect in this manner, okay? Something like this you can expect to happen when you are jumping up, let's say. Something that comes a lot more intuitively is when you are jumping down and you are hitting the ground. What will happen? Well, of course, the dust particles will expel from that specific area. So they will go in all areas around, okay? Very simple concept. I will show you a simple clip from Blasphemous and how they handled these particles. So when they jump up and when they land down on the ground. Likewise, I will show you a simple example how they did it in Celeste. The point is, you have some dust particles happening when there is an object interacting with the environment. Now that you have a basic guideline on how the particles should move, let's see how it looks on a simple example. We have a simple puff of smoke. Keeping in mind that, again, I want to show you examples that you will most likely be using in games. And this is something quite commonly used when you are jumping up or down. In this case, we are jumping down, we are hitting the ground, and you can sort of visualize that the ground should be here. It's a platformer view, meaning we are looking straight on the effect. And in games like Blasphemous, where the view is angled, you will have to create sort of a more circular effect, if you will, because perspective is what matters. Regardless, let's focus on the movement itself. So I will remove one side of it and focus on just one side, because the other one is exactly what happens on the right side, but just mirrored horizontally. On the very first frame where the effect is happening, so in this case it will be on frame 2, I've left the first and last frame empty just so I have some buffer zones so you can see the frames where it disappears. So on the first frame where the effect happens, you want large mass. You want a very large mass of, in this case, dust particles or just smoke. And then as we go away, it slowly disappears into the air. That's number one. Second thing we have to keep in mind is how fast our particle will move. This will depend on how much mass hit the ground, of course, but also what kind of movement it is. Is it continual or is it just one impact? In this case, we have a simple impact to the ground, which will result in this particle. Essentially, this means that our particle will have a lot of movement in the beginning and it will fade out, or rather it will lose a lot of its momentum and velocity as time goes on. Quite simply, this means that we want to have a lot of movement between each frame, a lot during the first couple of frames. So from frame 1 to frame 2 you have a lot of movement and you are just noticing this edge, let's say. So you are comparing the tip of this edge to this edge. You can see how there's quite a lot of movement happening in these two areas. And as it loses its momentum, we want to reduce the amount of space this particle is moving. In fact, on the last 2 frames you can see that we are just disappearing some of its smoke, but it doesn't change its ending position. This is again the principle of ease in and ease out, or slow in and slow out. This is why I've talked about animation principles before we started to animate this. Now this by itself looks okay. If we add it to other side as well, this is how it looks like. If we wanted to change the perspective, we would have to add it in other areas as well. So for example, if this were circular, we would have to create one smoke effect coming towards us and one away from us, and so on. So this is something that you have to keep in mind. Now, what if we wanted to add something else? Something that will make this effect look a bit better. Well, first thing we can do is we can fade the color. So as our puff of smoke is disappearing, we blend it with color. So I'm changing this white color towards black, meaning I'm starting to gray out each of these frames, one at a time. And on the last frame it's almost completely black, but it's dark gray. So this is very useful if you know exactly what kind of a background you will have. A lot of times in games you don't know what kind of a background is waiting for you. So a better way, more practical and flexible way, is to reduce it with opacity. On each of these frames, as you can see, starting from frame 3, if I go into the frame, you will see that the opacity is being reduced. And likewise, for every frame after, I'm reducing the opacity. This way, even if I change the background to, let's say, something blue, my smoke will still fade out properly, whereas this previous one won't. It will look different. Finally, if you want to add a little bit of shading, you can do that as well. So on each of these particles of smoke, I have shaded them like kind of small clouds. It's as simple as that. Okay? Now, keep in mind that you can add shading, you can add details. All of that works well even at high resolutions, as long as you get the movement right. That's all for this video. As always, remember to relax, enjoy, and have fun.